G'day everyone, it's Curtis here and welcome to an On The Back Wheel video. Today I'm going to compare the CFMOTO 800MT-X with the 450MT and also compare it to the competition and answer your questions about the bike. Now I already know what you're going to say, Curtis, you don't have an 800MT-X in front of you, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, I was lucky enough to ride one recently at the launch for 3 days and I've now owned this since, it was November last year. So I've got a really good idea how this rides and I've got a good feel for the 800MT-X as well. Let's briefly touch on the specs and how CFMOTO have categorized the 800MT-X and 450. Now they rate this as 60% off-road and 40% on-road. Lo and behold, the 800MT-X is rated exactly the same. They're really treating it as a stepping stone from the 450MT. And they are ridiculously well priced at the moment. This at the moment is under $10,000 Australian right away. For overseas viewers, that's with taxes and everything included, and it comes with accessories too. And the 800MT-X is $14,990 right away. So it is quite a big jump in price, but it is also a much more premium motorcycle. And that doesn't mean the 450MT doesn't have a lot of features for its price, it's just the 800 has a lot more. It's got an up and down quick shifter, cruise control, that's a big one, tire pressure sensors, a big portrait style dash, better suspension, better brakes, and the biggest thing is more power. Something worth mentioning with the 450MT is it is not a small motorcycle. Every single person who sees this bike goes, whoa, I was not expecting it to be that big. It is every bit a full-size motorcycle, and I'd compare it to something like an Aprilia Tuareg. Yes, it's a full-size bike. In saying that, the 800MT-X is a bit bigger. It has wider bars. When you sit on the bike, it feels a little bit heavier. You sit on top of the bike, whereas the 450MT is very much a sit-in motorcycle, and this is with the high seat. When you got the standard seat as well, it's more low slung, whereas the MT-X, you're much more on top of the motorcycle. It's a comfortable place to be, but it is noticeably bigger. Now, yes, it does have those low slung fuel tanks, but moving it side to side, you do notice that extra bit of weight. And so you should. It is pretty well 25 kilograms more than the 450MT. Build quality wise, the MT-X is a slight step up. The first thing you notice is that big portrait style dash. It's fantastic. I really like it's clear and easy to use. Other components, some are definitely shared. The brake and clutch levers, I think they are exactly the same. The switchgear is similar, but on the MT-X, it's got cruise control and a couple other little features as well. And just stuff like the finish on the seat, the stitching on that slightly higher quality on the MT-X. This bike here, the 450MT, is cracking value, and it really has set a new level with the build quality you are getting with the price, but the MT-X is slightly higher. Engine performance is where the biggest difference is with these bikes. There is a vast difference. I've got some stats for you here. The 450 has about 44 horsepower at the crank, and the 800 has 95 horsepower, so well over double. But it is only 12% heavier. What does that mean? Well, it's got way more poke. The power to weight ratio is massively improved on the 800MT-X. As soon as you take off, it just has way more grunt, and it's just a lot more fun to use that motor. The 450MT is perfectly serviceable for what it is. It's a 200 kilo 450. It's never gonna, blow your hair back. But that 800 is a really nice motor. It's fun to use. It can be quick at times. You can power slide in corners when you're on the dirt very easily. You can do wheelies. It is a lot of fun. And probably the biggest thing is on the highway. It really lopes along and does it easily. And then when you want to overtake, got plenty of power there in demand. The 450MT, it is buzzy stock on the highway. Thankfully, that's a really easy fix. You just put a taller rear profile tyre on it. That fixes up pretty well completely. We can also put on a different front sprocket, and that really gives you some lower gearing on the highway. All right, let's talk about suspension. The 450MT out of the box is pretty darn good, let alone for the price. CFMOTO really listened that they set up the bike so it wasn't soft and marshmallowy. I actually quite like the suspension out of the box. The 800MT-X, noticeable step up. It's much more premium feeling, it's kind of plush, yet it still has compliance when you want to ride it quickly. And there's a lot of adjustability there. It is a noticeable step up. Yes, you can modify this to make it much better, but you can also do the same on the 800MT-X. Another one is brakes. The front brakes especially are much better on the MT-X. On the 450, they're a bit wooden. They're serviceable, they're fine, but it's one of the faults I find with this bike. Where on the MT-X, very nice brakes, smooth, easy to use, and they got plenty of power. So up to now, you're probably thinking, man, Curtis is bagging the 450MT. Well, the 800 is just, it's a more premium motorcycle, guys. But where things do really even up is off-road. I think a good rider can hustle both these bikes just as quick and not have much difference at all. The MT-X, when you ride quicker, the suspension does work a lot better and does have a bit more ground clearance and just a smoother ride in general. In saying that, you do notice the extra weight. Yes, it's got low slung fuel tanks and it's all well balanced and all that stuff. But this has a brilliant balance. It is an extremely well balanced motorcycle. I've done a great job with that. In more technical riding, I would choose this bike over the MT-X. It's just a big bike, it's a little bit harder to handle. It's not to say you can't do it, it's just that this does it easier. In flowy stuff, I do prefer the MT-X. You know, it's got that extra power, it's just a lot more fun to use, and stock out of the box, the suspension just works really well. So which bike am I buying, ignoring the fact that I already own a 450MT? I'm going to 800MT-X all day, every day. Ton more performance, heaps more grunt, better suspension, better brakes. I mean, it's just a much better motorcycle overall. Here's the thing though, it is 50% more expensive here in Australia. Look, it's still an incredibly cheap motorcycle for what you're getting, but some people just don't have, you know, the extra $5 grand. It's a lot more money. And if you don't, you're still gonna be extremely happy with the 450MT. And one of the great things about this bike is, man, it is cheap to modify, and there are plenty of modifications out there for the bike, so you can bring it up to a little bit higher level if you want. All right, everyone, let's get into how the bike compares to the competition and also answer your questions about the bike. There's a fair bit here to get through. Now, the first bike everyone wants me to compare it to is the 800DE from Suzuki, and that makes sense because I owned one for a fair while. Now, funnily enough, the first time I got on that 800MT-X, I'm pointing to the wrong bike here. When I got on the 800MT-X, I thought, this reminds me of the 800DE a lot. Very similar in the way it feels and is balanced. 800D is better fueled. That fueling on the bike is brilliant. It's more tractable and controllable to me. But performance-wise, they are very similar in a lot of ways. Similar fuel capacity, similar weight. I will say the MT-X is more off-road capable out of the box. It's got more ground clearance. The suspension is better off-road and has better compliance. The 800D has very good suspension, but it's too soft out of the box. You really need to spend a bit of money on it and do the springs on it. Everywhere else, they're pretty similar in a lot of ways, but you have more features on the MT-X. You got the cruise control. That's a big one. Everyone's cruise control on the 800D. I don't know why they didn't to begin with. It was a really bizarre decision. Tubeless wheels as well, and a tyre pressure monitoring system as well. Look, if you're more off-road focused, I would go the MT-X, it's just better out of the box. But if you want reliability, go the 800D. That motor is going to last forever, and that Suzuki is built like a tank. Next, we have the Yamaha Tenere 700. Now, this one if off-road is your focus, go for the Tenere. It's a really well-designed motorcycle for off-road riding once you set it up. Everything's just so tucked away and well thought out. It's a good off-road adventure bike. If you want something that's more of an all-rounder, go the MTX. It has more features, it's better on the street. The MTX is a really nice street bike and for touring as well. And I think it's a better rounder, but yeah, off-road focus, go for the Tenere. Now, the big one people have been asking about as well is the Tuareg 660. I have said a million times, that is the best adventure bike on the market and nothing has changed. That is still my opinion. It's just a brilliant motorcycle that is so well designed and fantastic to ride. It's like a bigger version of this with more power, better performance, and the same weight as this. Like, they've done a great job with that bike. In saying that, a lot of people don't have very good dealer support for the Aprilias. Also, there's the price. It's a lot more expensive. They are in pretty good deals on run out at the moment, but it's still a more expensive motorcycle than this one. They do have similar features in a lot of ways though. But if you can afford it, I'm still going for the Tuareg. That bike is absolutely brilliant. Next one, we got the KTM 890R. This is an interesting one because the CFMOTO is very similar to the R versions from KTM. However, I think that 890 is still a bit more hardcore off-road focused. The suspension is firmer and just the kind of way it rides and feels, it's a harder motorcycle. So if you still want to do a bit more off-road focused stuff, I'll go that way. It'll be really interesting to see how the MTX does once it's all set up. Once, you know, it's got some heavier springs, and I think it does need heavier springs, a bit soft still for me. And everything else is set on the bike. It'd be really nice to compare it to the 890R once it's all kitted out. Question time. If you currently own a 450 and prefer more road than dirt, would you upgrade to the 800 MTX? 100%. Yep, definitely. If you've got the money, upgrade to the MTX. If you don't own either, what would you get and why? I'm definitely getting the 800 MTX again. It's a better motorcycle all round, better brakes, better suspension, seat's better, it's a wider seat on as well, I didn't mention that before. It tours a lot better and it's a super nice street bike. It's just high performing, out of the crate, and it's got over double power. Pickup test, I have done that. I'd say this is still a bit lighter. Yeah, it still feels a little bit lighter. They're both heavy motorcycles though, especially now I've got this thing all set up with crash bars and engine protection and all the other stuff I've got on it. It's pretty heavy to pick up, but I would say they're pretty similar to be honest, but this is a little bit lighter. Yeah, definitely a little bit lighter actually when I really think about it. I picked this up a lot. All right, off-road capability at 66 years. So for people that are a little bit older, this is easier to manage. It's a little bit lighter feeling off-road. That's something you're worried about in picking up. This is a little bit easier to manage. They're both still 200 kilo adventure bikes. Well, the other one's 220 and this is about 200, so they're not light still, but yeah, I'd say this is a bit easier to manage, especially once you get the suspension set up in this. I got mine done by Ride Dynamics and now it's pretty mint. You can push it pretty hard for an adventure bike. DIY maintenance, which is easier? I'm going to go this. I'm just doing this all off the cuff, by the way. Both incredibly easy to access the air filter. But this, I think it's just a bit easier to get to all your bash plate and everything because it doesn't have the low slung fuel tank. Everything's really easy to get to on this bike. This in fact, is an incredibly easy bike to work on in general, the 450. We'll see with the 800 MTX in the future. Which is better on the highway? The 800 MTX for sure. It's smoother, doesn't vibrate as much as well, and it kind of just lopes along and does it easy. It really does it easy. Fall over durability. That's a... I would say this, out of the bat, with the crash bars and everything, this thing is an absolute tank. The only things that's getting damaged on this bike for me are the crash bars and the bark busters. Everything else is really well protected. I did notice on the MTX launch, some of the sides were getting scuffed up and stuff, but it didn't have crash protection as well. And also, with that big low slung fuel tank, yes, it's great. It covers your engine a bit, makes it have better balance. You've really got to cover that up with a big bash plate that is expensive, by the way, extremely expensive. How is it in sandy conditions, the 800MT-X? Yeah, good. We rode it in a lot of sandy stuff, actually. It was wet the whole launch and sandy. It was pretty good. It's a lot to handle, but you know, it's a big adventure bike. It's a lot of fun. You got that power as well, just to grunt it out of situations in the big, deeper, loamy sand. Fuel consumption versus 450MT. This is an interesting one. I did note it on the MTX launch. It got slightly higher fuel economy, but then when you're cruising on the highway, extremely similar or lower. So that's worth noting. For me, with this, I feel like I'm riding it harder all the time because it's a 450. You got to rev it that bit more, and you got to push it that bit more. Though I like to get the destinations quickly. Let's just put it that way. I like to ride quickly. So if you're pushing and touring, the MTX is probably a better bet. Around town and that, this is actually really economical and probably slightly better. Torque versus the 450MT, that's a no-brainer, mate. The MTX has way more grunt everywhere in the rev range. This you got to rev a little bit. Have they addressed the cam issues? Yes, they have. They were very quick to note that because they get so many questions on it as well. They've changed the oil delivery to the cams. They found a fault with how KTM have done it, and they believe they completely fixed it, and they are willing to cover it completely if you have any issues with it. They said that to me and everyone else that was at the MTX launch. So yes, they believe they fixed it, and reliability-wise, it looks like they have so far. What weight saving can be done on the MTX? The first thing I know for sure is the exhaust, especially the mid-pipe. On the KTM 790s and 890s, you change that pretty well straight away. You get rid of the catalytic converter and a heap of weight on those. Also, chucking a lithium battery, it's just got a standard battery as well. I saw all the snorkels and crap, there was stuff there that can go on them, so I would look at doing that. Besides that, yeah, that's probably going to be about 10 kilos there, but besides that, there's not much else you can do. Next one, is the mapping still crap? No, the mapping is fantastic. I found it to be pretty well spot on. It does have that ride-by-wire feel, where it's not completely natural, but is really good. It's nice and soft off bottom and pretty good throughout the whole rev range. How's it versus the CRF 300 Rally? Well, that's a different one. They're completely different. The 300 Rally I'd put in a different class completely. It's a lot lighter. It's a single cylinder, much more manageable off-road, pretty much a dirt bike that's made to tour a little bit. Yeah, that's a hard one to compare. I would say if you want something more for touring, go the MTX. If you're doing more dirt stuff, go for the 300 Rally. How are the vibrations? It's a very smooth motorcycle, no issues there. Heat, didn't notice it to be an issue. However, it was also really cold and wet on our ride. We've got a couple more here. How is it for novices off-road? I wouldn't go anywhere near a big adventure bike if you're a novice off-road. I'd start on dirt bikes and then work your way up from there. How is the seat height? It's pretty low actually. It's definitely got a wider seat, which makes it taller than this initially. This is extremely low. This with the standard seat, and then you can lower it again, is extremely low. One thing I will say with the MTX, if you are worried about seat height, they have the low model standard that has suspension with less travel. It lowers the bike by about 40mm, and then you can also get the low seat on top of that, which makes it incredibly low. So seat height shouldn't be an issue for anyone on that model. Last one. Am I considering the 800MT-X as my next bike? You betcha, I'm getting one. All right, everyone, that is it from me. If you've got any more questions, put them down below and I'll try and answer them for you. If you haven't, click that subscribe button and keep it on the back wheel. Catches.